What's up, MTG fam? Welcome to another episode of Beatdowns with the Boz. Today I present to you the Grand Prix winning deck list from GP Utrecht. This is a really sweet deck. It's a take on the old Mardu Vehicles deck that is still quite good, but this deck goes a little bit bigger, so it's better in the mirror, and it's a little better at grinding out the decks that are trying to grind out the normal aggressive version of Mardu Vehicles. So it's still a artifact theme deck. It still has Unlicensed Disintegration, Toolcraft Exemplar, and Spire of Industry that all want an artifact in play. And instead of playing a few extra vehicles at the 3-drop slot, this deck is instead playing Walking Ballista. So the deck gets a little bit more consistency, and also Walking Ballista is just a really good card. It gives you a lot of flexibility, it disrupts the Sihili combo, it's good against opposing Toolcraft Exemplars and Veteran Motorists from the aggressive versions of Mardu. So Walking Ballista is just a really good card, raises the artifact count, really good in this deck. We still also have Thraben Inspector, that's kind of a pseudo artifact hiding out in the 1-drop slot, along with these 12 other artifacts. And because Scrapheap Scrounger is a card that can come back from the graveyard, this deck should always have an artifact available. So your Toolcraft Exemplars are going to be jacked, and going up the curve, we've got more removal than the traditional Mardu Vehicles decks had. The old ones only had like 4 Unlicensed Integrations and then either 2 Shock or 2 Fatal Push. But here we're up to a full 8 copies of removal. Thalia, great creature, disrupts the Sihili combo. And to top things off, we've got a full 6 Planeswalkers. So we can still come out of the gates fast with like Heart of Kiran, Toolcraft Exemplar, but we also have the opportunity to disrupt our opponent a lot and grind them out with cards like Ballista, Gideon, and Chandra. So pretty powerful deck. You're getting a lot at a relatively low curve, and this mana base is better than some of the past mana bases I've seen. To note, this deck is a little bit more white-black. The previous Mardu lists were more white-red, splashing black, and they had Veteran Motorists to kind of help smooth things out at the 2-drop slot. But because there's been so many Walking Ballistas, and even though Veteran Motorist is an awesome card and it's powerful in these decks with Heart of Kiran, it just doesn't line up that well against a lot of the cards other decks are playing, such as Walking Ballista, or just having random 1/1 Thopters, or Thraben Inspectors, you know. So that's the main deck. And then in the sideboard, we have an Authority of the Consuls, probably the best sideboard card against the Sihili decks. We've got 4 Release the Gremlins, which is probably the best sideboard against the Mardu decks. And then we have kind of a transformational sideboard with a bunch of Planeswalkers and these Oaths so that we can do an extra good job grinding out the green-black decks. And those 3 decks that I just mentioned are basically the pillars of the format right now. Mardu, green-black, and then various versions of Sihili. There'll be a lot of versions of all of those different archetypes, but they are the 3 major archetypes that you kind of need to worry about. So this is one of the decks that I'm considering for Grand Prix New Jersey, and I think you guys should too. And I'm pretty excited to get into these games and see how it does. All right, so here we are in our first match, and we have a phenomenal hand. Really good. We don't have a good way to crew our Heart of Kiran right now, but all the cards in our hand are quite good, and our mana options are turned on. I kind of want to just play the Concealed Courtyard here, but drawing the Needle Spires really makes me think I should play that. I don't have any red things that early on my curve. I think I'm going to play the Needle Spires. Against a Inspiring Vantage deck, I don't think I need to go out of my way to play out my cards as fast as I possibly can. Definitely don't think I need to play my heart here. If this is a mirror match, then I think that I just want things, or I think that things are likely going to play out in a more attrition-y sort of way. And since I don't have a good way to crew my Heart of Kiran, there's really no reason to play it. And by sequencing things this way, I just get to save myself a little bit of damage. So now I have an interesting option. I could play my Thalia, or I could do something else. I think I want to play my Thalia because one of the things I'm most worried about is my opponent just playing Gideon. And it uses my mana more efficiently. Most of the, or all the Mardu Ballista decks are playing Fatal Push instead of Shock. So I would not expect my opponent to shock my Thalia here end of turn. My opponent might have Unlicensed Disintegration. Opponent might also have Chandra. But that Disintegration was going to tag something good no matter what. And let's see, I have a few options here. I think that what I want to do is play my Heart and the Scrounger. So I'm going to be taking a bit more damage here. Going to 11 is not particularly exciting, especially because I'm really not going to have any good answers for this Scrapheap Scrounger ever with this deck. My best answer to Scrapheap Scrounger is playing a Gideon and just being able to block it forever. Wow, and so I'm going to kill that. That's going to be really good for me. My opponent probably could have attacked with the Scrapheap Scrounger, and I would have at least considered not blocking with the Heart of Kiran. But thing's not doing anything on defense, that's for sure. What do I want to do here? Well, I think I definitely want to kill the Gideon. And then I think I'm just going to play my Walking Ballista on 2 and my Toolcraft Exemplar on 1. And I've got enough creatures to crew my Heart. And I still have the Ballista to unload too. So this seems like a pretty good position for me. Quite the favorable turnaround. So this seems like kind of a desperate attack to me because if my opponent had something really good, seems like he would have attacked with the knight also. Yeah. So let's see, how much can I attack for? I could attack for 14 if I wanted. Pretty good if I shoot this down. I wonder if my opponent has Avacyn. That would be pretty impressive. Well, I think what I'm going to do is go to combat, have my Exemplar crew the Heart, and then attack with everything else. If my opponent flashes in an Avacyn, I can unlicense disintegrate it, but I wouldn't be able to save my Walking Ballista, which would be a little annoying. But I'll get 7 damage in. I guess I can trade my Walking Ballista for it. Yeah, I'll just attack with everything. I think my opponent has Avacyn, but there's a good chance my opponent actually just has nothing and just has another land. Oh, wow, it does look like Avacyn. All right, so in that case, I think I'm basically priced into killing this Knight ally now. And then casting Unlicensed Disintegration on the Avacyn. And this is obviously still pretty good for me. I get to knock my opponent down to 10, and I have a dominating board with him having nothing. So, okay. So we are indeed in the mirror, and we have a couple different options. The main thing I think is we just want Release the Gremlins. It's so good. And I think we're just going to take out the Toolcraft Exemplars. We can have some really powerful draws with Toolcraft Exemplar. We're not taking it out because it's a bad card, but in this matchup where there's going to be up to 4 fatal pushes, a bunch of Walking Ballistas that can shoot it down, and big Planeswalkers that can make Toolcraft Exemplar irrelevant, I think that it's just it would be great to have a Toolcraft Exemplar in my opening hand, but outside of that situation, they're probably going to be pretty bad. And even if I have it on turn 1, there's a chance that my opponent will be able to trade with it pretty quickly. So, and I like keeping in Thalia because having a Thalia in play is a really good way to pressure Gideon. So I'll be honest, 4 Release the Gremlin seems like a lot to me, but if that's the way the kids do it nowadays, that's the way I'm doing it too. If I start taking out too many creatures, then my Heart of Kirans are not as powerful. So I don't think boarding in. Actually, I guess that doesn't really make sense. Oh, this hand's pretty icky, but we're gonna keep it. I don't want to make my deck too clunky when I have 4 Heart of Kirans, even though the Planeswalkers can crew them. Like my curve just might be too high. Well, this is very unfortunate. Drawing, like keeping a 5 land 2 spell hand, not exciting, but then drawing another land is just ugh. Unfortunately, my opponent doesn't have a whole lot going on as of now. I almost don't want to play this Ballista because I think there's a good chance it just dies, and kind of want to get more value out of it. And my hand is so flooded. I'm not under pressure. So I might regret this, but I'm going to hold off on the Ballista. Just does so little as a 1/1. Well, I'm glad I have a basic planes. Can't imagine my Thalia gets to live very long. We shall see. Ooh, my Thalia's getting them. Looked like my opponent was going to cast something and then didn't. I wonder if my opponent was expecting that Aether Hub to come into play untapped. Be pretty crazy if my opponent has something like a Chandra in hand and can't cast it right now. Wow. So let's see here. I think that I should not attack with my Thalia. So I think that I shouldn't cast my Ballista yet. My opponent does play a Chandra. Ballista's going to be the one way I can kill it. Can still get. Oh wow, Liliana. Jeez. Did not expect that. Wow, so now I've got a 1/1 Thalia? Ugh. So this puts me to 8. I can Gideon Emblem to kill the Liliana. Nope, that's not true. My opponent has a Thraben. Oh wait, no, I didn't correct my land. Oh, I'm so bad. And what do I do now? I Gideon Emblem and attack the Liliana, and my opponent blocks with the Inspector. My opponent can crack back for 7, which puts me at 1 against a deck that potentially has Chandra, Walking Ballista, and Unlicensed Disintegration. I don't know how I'm going to win this game. Maybe I Emblem and just don't attack. And then I can play a Ballista on 3 next turn. So if I make a knight, it doesn't do anything. And even with the Liliana minus, my Thalia can still beat the Scrapheap Scrounger in combat. And my Thraben Inspector can be fairly effective against the other Thraben Inspectors, or even trade with the Scrounger. So I think this is the best defensive move. So that puts me at 5. So if my opponent attacks with everything, I'm dead. Opponent saw the play. And we're just going to run it back. No changes, no siree. And Release the Gremlins is so good against this deck. It really is just insane. Ooh, not going to be able to keep this. I guess we keep this. Don't want a white card when I don't have any planes. So if I just ripped like 2 white sources off the top, I'm going to be in kind of good shape. Oh, that's pretty good. And if I can just draw another land, I'm actually going to be feeling pretty comfortable just with these Release the Gremlins. I'm hoping my Heart of Kiran doesn't get killed here, but I don't think not blocking is a particularly good idea. Or excuse me, not attacking is a particularly good idea. Yeah, that's fine. I mean, it's not really fine, but you guys know what I'm saying. Now I could really use a mana source for this Release the Gremlins. Ooh, just in time before Evil Thalia showed up. Might as well attack with this. This is quite the swing. Oh yes. Yeah, Release the Gremlins is actually just a completely insane card. Wow. Well, looks like I'm going to be releasing the Gremlins on my opponent's clue. Nearly dead. Might actually be safer to just Unlicensed Disintegration on this Exemplar. Because if my opponent has another removal spell, it puts me to 2. If it was an Unlicensed Disintegration, I could be dead if my opponent can also generate another clue. Actually, the fact that my opponent doesn't have double white or double red, or black mana for that matter, I think that I actually do want to go after this clue. A close game. Yeah, a lot of my opponents. Oh, he's got artifact. Does my opponent have a removal spell though? Oh, I get to trade. This is so good for me. Now if I could draw, come on, planes. I'll take it. Four. Oh man, if my opponent has unlicensed integration, I'm dead. Ugh. So I could block the Inspector and then kill the Scrounger. My opponent will just get the Scrounger back. That doesn't do anything. So if I play Gideon, I'm going to take a damage off Spire of Industry. And then I'll be at 4. I can make a token. My opponent's actually going to have 2 Scrapheap Scroungers. Oh, man. I guess I do have to make the Ballista. Otherwise, I'm actually just dead. Beating these 2 Scroungers is actually so tough. See, so this puts my opponent to 9. If my opponent, my opponent takes a damage somehow. Okay. So if my opponent attacks with everything, I could potentially kill him. Oh no, that's not true, because I have to kill a Ballista right now. Or a Scrounger right now. Otherwise I will be dead. On my turn I can knock my opponent to 2. But I'm gonna be at 1. So I basically need to draw a Thraben Inspector or Fatal Push. Wow, that does it. Holy cow. Yeah, that just barely does it. I can kill both the attackers. Maybe I should have actually killed the Scrapheap Scrounger during my opponent's upkeep so that if he drew a double red card, wouldn't be able to cast it. Ooh, brutal. That takes away my stuff. So now I think that I'm drawing dead. I have no idea what. what I could have here. Man, pretty close. That was the last card in my opponent's hand. Can't really be too upset about losing the mirror. What the heck, Liliana? Oh man, if I had another artifact. So I can't cast my Gideon. Yep, I'm just dead. Oh well, sick game anyway. If I had another mana, I could bring back the Scrapheap Scrounger and then cast the Disintegration. But that is not the case. Alright, so here we are in our second match. We are fortunate enough to be on the play. One lander is not going to be good enough. We do indeed have to mulligan. This hand's good. Oh yeah, definitely putting that on top. So this could be potentially one of our best draws. We have our 3 best threats to open up with. And if we can draw any removal, just so that nothing gets in our way, we're going to be in good shape. This is what we call a blisteringly fast start. Which I'm quite happy about. One looks like there's going to be no shock. To put our opponents to 10? 10 life? And Toolcraft Exemplar is just too nice. Oh wow, he does have a shock. Oh, Lightning Axe. Well, so it looks like we're against the blue-red, Fevered Visions, Scabs, Elder Deep-Fiend, Prized Amalgam deck. Which is a pretty cool deck. Not gonna lie. Wow, look at this. What value? Oh, bless me. Well, this is pretty good from our opponent. Still kind of got him under the gun, though. Opponent really doesn't have any answer for this Scrounger. So hopefully we can just sort of ride what we have to victory. Opponent's deck has some very, very powerful plays. But we'll have to see if they actually come up. Wow, nothing from my opponent. I wonder if my opponent has like a bunch of prized Malcolms and Deep-Fiends in his hand, but no discard outlet. Unbelievable! That was crazy. Alright, so what do I want to do here? Actually, just not that well equipped, I don't think. My fatal pushes are not good in this matchup. And I don't have anything to bring in that is good in this matchup. So what I could do is just bring in some Planeswalkers. So I could bring in some Planeswalkers, but I really don't think they're that good. These fatal pushers are just not good either. It seems silly to bring in an Oath without a Planeswalker. Especially because my creature stuff just kind of comes back. Authority of the Consuls can... Authority of the Consuls can do some stuff. But... I guess I'll just bring in the Planeswalkers. I don't really like it though. The games go long. I feel like my opponent's still kind of advantaged, but maybe this will give me more of an opportunity to just kind of hang. I do get to play Heart of Kiran into Scrapheap Scrounger, so that's really good. Wow, double scab. Pretty nasty. I don't really want to... Maybe I do want to play the Scrounger first. I think my opponent's turn, they're just going to put a scab into play. And if there's Amalgam with it, or they have like some sort of removal spell for my heart, it's going to be bad news. So I'm only missing 1 point of damage on my attack by playing the Scrounger instead. So I might need to start firing off Unleash Disintegrations this turn. Perfect mana. So I'd rather play my heart, but can't really crew it right now. If my opponent plays the Stitchwing, discards like 2 prized amalgams, I'm way behind in the race. So we've only got 1 amalgam. I think I still want to kill the... Wait, isn't the Oh, I guess my opponent was supposed to do that at the end of my main phase. I was like waiting for the Gab to come into play. Maybe my opponent wanted to do that because my opponent intended to discard more prized amalgams, but with the scab already in the graveyard, seems kind of like a non-issue. There's the Ob Nixilis. So I do have to worry about an Elder Deep-Fiend. Something you gotta keep on the radar. Alright, so my opponent didn't put anything good into play. And I need to decide if I want to unlicense disintegrate this. My opponent only has 1 card in play in hand. I think that it's worth it, or yeah, for me to do this now. If I wait, then I have to worry about Deep-Fiend even more. And I do have my opponent pretty low. My opponent does nothing to my mana. I can potentially play Ob Nixilis. And if my opponent plays a Deep-Fiend and let's say taps down my Scrounger and 2 lands, I can still at least cast the Heart of Kiran with an additional land drop. So I feel like I'm fairly well insulated, or as well insulated as I can be from the worst case scenarios. So I don't know if my opponent is baiting me or not. I guess I can just attack. I feel like if my opponent had a Deep-Fiend, my opponent would have just cast it, most likely. So what do I want to do? I guess I play the Ob Nixilis here. Because next turn I can play Chandra plus Heart. Just in case my opponent does have a Deep-Fiend, I'll let him animate first. Ooh, actually my opponent's going to get Scob plus Amalgam back. I guess that actually wasn't as well thought out as I hoped it would be. So Ob Nixilis will cantrip and maybe absorb some damage. So not actually the best move. It seemed like my opponent didn't have Deep-Fiend, and I was maybe overdoing it, playing around the small possibility that my opponent did have one and just like chose not to cast it. But so if I play Chandra and plus, Chandra will be at 5, so I can minus the 4 to block with the Heart. Now my opponent is pretty close to dead, and I am definitely not. My opponent can suicide attack into Chandra, but can't kill it without extra help. My opponent has 2 cards in his hand, so he can get the Scab back, and if the Amalgam's in the graveyard, get that back too. But I'm not sure what my opponent could be working with. Wow, no attack. That tells me my opponent's got nothing good. Pretty crazy though that my opponent has nothing. Oh, okay, so there's a Deep-Fiend. Alright. Because I have so much mana, this Deep-Fiend isn't that devastating. Might as well make him sweat it. Ooh, Ballista's kind of nice. So actually, I can play Ballista for 3. Could also just play Ballista for 2. And do this, which is, I think is just as good. Ooh, man, I do love me a Gideon. Actually, I didn't play my land, so I don't even have this option. Kind of a shame. But I do put my opponent in the situation where my opponent needs to kill this Chandra. Otherwise, my opponent's going to be very dead. So, I guess I just shoot it. I mean, I can just reload the counters on this thing, so it's not like a Deep-Fiend's going to do anything. I think that was pretty weird that my opponent didn't attack. All right. All right, so here we are in yet another game. We have another great hand. This deck is just great hands all the time so far. And we're up up against Spire Bluff Canal yet again. And it looks like we're against the Mardu version that splashes a little bit of blue for counterspells. And I actively want to play out my non-basic lands because my opponent might have Thalia. Anticipate. So I wonder if we're against maybe Jeskai Saheeli. I would have originally guessed the Mardu Splash Blue deck, but Jeskai Saheeli makes a lot more sense after seeing this Anticipate. Whoa! Radiant Flames. That hurt. That was actually really bad for us, because now we don't have anything. Don't have to worry about Thalia. Yeah, I'd really like it if my opponent just tapped out for a Felidar Guardian right now. I could play Chandra and kill it. That would be literally the bee's knees. Come on, tap out for something. No. Please do it. Please. Please, 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 please. Tap your mana for a creature. Ugh. So, feel like whatever I play isn't going to resolve in a million years. But I don't really have anything else to do, so YOLO. Man. It would have been really nice if that resolved. A lot of times in a situation like this, I'll slow roll my best threat and play the Heart of Kiran before the Chandra. But because Heart of Kiran is such a cheap spell, and the relative curve of this deck is such that I'm probably going to be able to, like if I draw another spell, which I basically need to, I can probably play it and Heart, which is true. Did seem like my opponent was thinking of tapping out for something, so maybe I could have gotten away with baiting the negate out with the Heart, but there's a chance that my opponent just didn't have a counter spell and just had creature removal or like a Glimmer of Genius. And 3-6. Wow, my opponent. So normally I would just attack with this Scrounger here, but there's such a good chance that my opponent has a Gear Hulk. So my opponent has a removal spell. My opponent gets to ultimate the Nahiri no matter what. This is not a good draw. I'm happy I played around the Gear Hulk. I'm not really happy with how this game's going. I think I am pretty dead. It's definitely a matchup where I'm going to be boarding in as all my planeswalkers. And I don't even know if I can race this Gear Hulk. If I was in a tournament and I was running out of time, I would concede. Ooh, my Scrounger's dead. Exiled. This game is likely to end rather quickly, though. All right, we're just out of here. Opponent is way, 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 way ahead. You just want all this stuff. And yeah, that's it. So nice about this setup is we have so much threat density. We only have 4 dedicated removal spells. But between Ob Nixilis, Nahiri, Chandra, and these 4 Walking Ballistas, still have plenty of interaction if our opponent decides to board into some extra creatures. So I'm pretty good about this configuration. We've got a very good hand. Opponent is mulliganed. We are on the play. How could we lose? Hashtag famous last words. Always play your Exemplar first when you have an Inspector. Ooh, and we're getting in for that 3 damage. And we're definitely going to be able to play our Gideon. That's really good. I guess we'll play the Spire. Don't really have to worry about Thalia messing with our mana, or anything for that matter. So in this situation, it doesn't really matter how we choose to play out our lands, but really hope my opponent just casts Anticipate here. Oh, happy that I at least got the damage in. I wonder if my opponent was specifically holding up that Harness Lightning for like a Thalia. It's not. So I really don't want my Gideon to get tagged. I really don't want my Gideon to get tagged by a negate. But I don't really have any other options here or ways to use my mana this turn. Wow. So many negates. And I'm planning on just playing this Ob Nixilis on this upcoming turn, so wow, my opponent doesn't have anything. That's crazy. So I'm really hoping my opponent doesn't have another counterspell. My opponent doesn't have another counterspell and this Ob Nixilis resolved. I feel really good about this game. All right. My opponent does not have very many good ways to answer this Ob Nixilis. And especially with this Gideon in hand, We are likely to run away with things now. Ooh, actually, no, my opponent... I wonder if my opponent could have Spell Queller. Oh, I actually can't cast my Gideon. Yes, I can. But I should cast my Inspector first, otherwise I can't cast both. Yeah, and now this game is just completely out of reach for my opponent. Especially because I have these two unlicensed disintegrations. My opponent's going to pay 4 mana to draw 2 cards, look at his hand, and concede. What can my opponent do, really? Even if my opponent answers my creatures, Gideon's still a 2-turn clock. Ob Nixilis can ultimate soon. Come on, ZZ99. Scoop him up. Let's go to game 3. I've got all the stuff, all the mana, and I'm drawing an extra card every turn. And with this configuration, we can just run it back. This will definitely be a mulligan. And this will be a very reluctant keep. So Gideon's one of our best cards, but if we just go turn 1, 1/1, and then nothing for 3 more turns, then play Gideon, it's pretty bad. And I guess we just keep it and pray our opponent doesn't have a counterspell. This does not feel good. You can certainly make a solid argument that I should have bottomed it to try to draw some sort of early artifact creature to make my draw somewhat threatening. But I think my opponent is going to have a much easier time answering my random creatures. Oh, maybe I'm wrong, rather than a planeswalker. Jeez. This is like what you never want to have happen when you're playing against a control deck. So here, I'm going to play the Ballista. My opponent doesn't have any red mana. I've seen Negate, but I haven't seen the other counter spells. And this is something that I can use to bait out a counter spell. Opponent could have something like Blessed Alliance here. But yeah, so at least I have a little bit of pressure. I'd really like to resolve this Gideon. Would love it if my opponent just tapped out for a Nahiri. Would love that. Come on, tap more mana. Tap a 4th. Ugh. Now my opponent still has a negate mana open. It's very unfortunate. And in case I needed another unlicensed integration, I've got it. Come on, please resolve. Please. No, don't counter it. Ugh. Well, now I'm probably dead. Well, I can kill the Gear Hulk, but the fact that it's a full 3-for-1 does not bode well for me. I mean, maybe my opponent will just flood out. Maybe my opponent will just draw all 4 Gear Hulks, tap out for them. I'll unlicense disintegrate them all, and then my opponent will be out of answers for it. Seems unlikely. The old Torrential Gear Hulk into Glimmer, into Torrential Gear Hulk play. Seen this before. No, my Ballista. I really wish I had a artifact in play when I cast these unlicensed integrations. Make them a lot more effective. There is a conceivable way where I just burn my opponent out, even if my opponent has the game mostly locked up. Can't imagine this resolves, but they're not going to get better for me if I wait. Wow, Gear Hulk. Not looking good for the home team. Main reason we've lost these games is we just did not have really great draws. Now my opponent has a threat on the board, and my opponent can just sort of protect the queen, so to speak. Now with the Planeswalker 2, looking really, really bad. Well, this is a thing that's fairly hard to deal with. And it's notably an artifact. And post Glimmer, we will definitely unlicense disintegrate this thing. And we will not redirect the damage to Nahiri. Killing Nahiri seems out of the question. Attacking with Scrounger might actually be out of the question as well. If our opponent ultimates the Nahiri, I assume our opponent will just get a Gear Hulk, in which case we can kill it. And, you know, put our 3 damage in. Ooh, Stasis Snare. You dirty dog. Well, that's a problem now, isn't it? Well, there's nothing really we can unlicense disintegrate here. And we are never getting that Scrounger back. We do have our own Nahiri, which is cool. Man, hashtag feels bad, man. Really does. Opponent's drawn so many cards. Maybe my opponent will exile the Stasis Snare. That'd be nice. Oh, I forgot it returns. Ugh. My opponent has enough mana to recast it too. I wish I had drawn an artifact there. If I'd drawn an artifact, I would be able to have my opponent down to 5. So, I don't know if I can afford to unlicensed disintegrate this. I feel like if I unlicensed disintegrate this, then I'm basically drawing dead. So I'm going to let my opponent untap, end Nahiri, and probably find a counter spell. But how else am I winning, honestly? Can I has a heart, please? But I really wish this was Thraben Inspector, so I could cast both my unlicensed. And I don't think there's a better time. And we're dead. All right, good game. All right, here we are in yet another exciting match. And, ugh. Well, this hand will do, actually. Get to be on the play, and we're going to go turn 1 Toolcraft, probably turn 2 Ballista. It's a little nerve-wracking to not have the right mana. And we could, or like, not have lands that are just tap for white mana on their own. We could play this a little safer and play the Inspector first, but I don't actually think that that's a good idea because it's just not nearly as powerful as playing the Exemplar. And in order for us to really get screwed, we would need to not draw another artifact and not draw something that taps for white mana and have our opponent kill our Ballista. So the fact that we would need all 3 of those things to go wrong for our play to be incorrect means that playing it safe is probably just not a good EV proposition. And now we're like golden. Totally golden. So we can't kill our opponent. And Rogue Refiner is pretty annoying because we can't really attack into it. If we unlicense disintegrate it, then our opponent is down to 10. And we can attack for 4, 5, 6. Putting our opponent to 4. I think the better move is just to play this Gideon. Or no, our opponent would be at 5. 3, 4, 5, 8. Ballista could put our opponent down to a virtual 4. So that means actually a Gideon emblem might just kill him on the following turn. I think we're still looking at a kill for next turn. So yeah, I think I am going to do it this way. Having our opponent at such a low life total is totally waffling on this. It's not like our opponent's going to combo kill us this turn. And if our opponent is able to play like a Harness Lightning and hold the negate up, having the Gideon on board is going to be the more unbeatable thing. Guess actually I just try to kill it now. Even if my opponent has an answer for the Ballista. Yeah. Guess I should have gone to combat and let my Toolcraft Exemplar get the boost before I cast it. Sure. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. My opponent's at 3. I have an infinite board. Wow, my opponent could actually have Fumigate here. Oh my gosh. Dude, my opponent is going to win. I'm totally boned. I can't believe this. Wow. My opponent is a stone master. Unbelievable. Oh my gosh. Everything's going wrong. I cannot believe this. I mean, I'm at the point where top deck Walking Ballista can just put my opponent to 1, so that's cool, I guess. Is this just like a Bant control deck with Rogue Refiners for value? This is absolutely crazy. These refiners are a real problem. Man, and I'm on a 2-turn clock. I need a Ballista ASAP. Ballista would be nice. Jeez. I still can't believe that Fumigate. Oh my gosh. So Chandra minus isn't good enough. Oh my gosh. All right. Next game. Are we going to be boarding the same way that we did against the Jeskai control deck? And we didn't see any red, so I assume that my opponent doesn't have the Saheeli combo. Otherwise, we would consider bringing in Authority of the Consuls. You know, my Planeswalkers are great, but and just because it fits my curve so conveniently, I'm going to play the Ballista on 1. For the early portion of the game, one of the big advantages I can get is basically just by flooding the board with threats. Well, my opponent still has no red mana, so that's really good for me. Here is actually really nice. I saw Stasis Snare in the previous game. And this game certainly looks great for me, but so did the last one. I feel like that last game was just stolen from me. I should have won that. Come on. Now if my opponent taps out for Rogue Refiner, I'm definitely casting Gideon. And there's no way I'm ever gonna... Alright, so here, I may actually want to play the Nahiri instead. Because I think that my opponent is holding up Negate. Ooh, I could actually just not cast any of my Planeswalkers. Yeah, my opponent's just got Negate mana open. I'm gonna make him answer my board. So I do have to worry about Negate on this upcoming turn. I mean, just Fumigate, excuse me. If I attack and pump up my Walking Ballista, I could walk into something like a Blessed Alliance and miss a good opportunity to land a Gideon. If I don't do that though, I may miss a point of damage. I think I'm just gonna attack. And then do nothing. And yeah, I don't want to do, like I could cast the Exemplar, but I'd rather not. My opponent casts Fumigate here, I can sack the Ballista, or I can pump and sack the Ballista. And I'm going to be able to land my Exemplar and a Gideon, and I still have a clue in play, so that's good. And I do indeed have enough white mana, which is also notable. Yeah, I have no intention of plussing my Gideon ever. That's a great target for Unlicensed Integration. So actually with that, I can plus my Gideon. Because if my opponent taps out for a Stasis Snare, then I can just Unlicensed Disintegration the Rogue Refiner. I guess I could just start with the Unlicensed Disintegration, see what my opponent does. Opponent will probably just concede when I cast it. You, sir, are dead. All right, we got the win. And we'll just run it back. Well, 10's pretty bad in a lot of ways, but it's got two of our best threats and a creature land, so might be our best 2-spell 5-land hand. Never feel good about keeping the 2 spells 5 lands, but you know. All right, so this is an interesting decision. I guess I'll just play the Scrounger. My opponent could have a negate. I do have 2 Heart of Kirans, so it's not a completely pertinent point, but I actually wouldn't mind if this got Stasis Snare just so that we could land our other stuff. And my opponent takes it. Negate. Disallow, right. Not the end of the world. We're casting 2 spells a turn. No big deal. We're great. And yep, we're still great. All right, so currently we cannot get that back from the graveyard. A little bit of a downer, as you may guess. But we can play out our other stuff. And wow, our opponent does have the negate. Oh no, we forgot to play our land. So bad. That's so bad. Well, maybe this will be like a sick bluff where our opponent thinks our hand is completely stacked. And actually, I don't even want to cast this. I feel like my opponent's just gonna fumigate. Actually, my opponent had already cast 2 counter spells. Maybe it was worthwhile for me to try to cast Gideon there. I feel like my opponent's got to do something soon, though. My opponent's kind of taking a lot of damage. Well, this is fine for us. So actually, this is interesting. I could land Gideon here, but I think I'm better off playing Ballista plus Disintegration. Because if my opponent has any way to kill my Gideon, or the knight that Gideon makes, that it's gonna be bad news. So we're at the point of the game where things are gonna get a bit more difficult for us. But at least we have our opponent at a low life total and we have some pressure on the board. And if this is a Fumigate, Quarantine Field. All right, well, I'm going to wait to see the targets first. If I had sacked the Ballista too soon, my opponent could have just targeted my clue. That wouldn't have been cool. Ooh, so I could actually whack my opponent for 4. But I guess I can do that later anyway. And do I want to draw a clue here? No, I don't want to draw a clue. Because I can play Scrapheap Scrounger. So this is looking really good for us. We've got Scrounger and Gideon to play this turn. It's like really good. Well, that's probably really annoying noise for you guys. I apologize. I am on the 3rd floor of a studio. The person below me might just make noise sometimes. So I feel like my opponent's probably in a situation where he's got no good options. Best thing my opponent could have done this turn was cast Gear Hulk into something else good. But right now we're just looking at like an immolating glare. So my opponent has enough mana where he could Stasis Snare and Immolating Glare. So he could take down Gideon and the Scrapheap Scrounger, meaning Needle Spires plus Knight would put him to 1. But 1 is not none. So let's see. Guess I'll just start by, well, if I crack my clue, then I can't activate my Spire. I wonder how bad this would be if my opponent had Avacyn. My opponent has Avacyn, my opponent can block the Needle Spire, and then these 2 creatures knock my opponent to 2. I guess I'll just activate the Needle Spires and get in for as much damage as I can this turn without risking my Gideon. I would have to have exactly Stasis Snare plus Immolating Glare to live this. I think I'm going for this, even though he's like taunting me or whatever. You guys notice that on the side? It's like pretty funny. Is this a disallow? It is indeed a disallow. Which doesn't really seem that good to me. But an Immolating Glare here lets him live. My opponent's only at 2. And maybe my opponent can make something out of this. Maybe another Quarantine Field? My opponent plays Quarantine Field and I just draw Nahiri. That would be such gas. Alright, we got it. Alright, we are in our final match. We get to be on the play. And we're going to keep this hand. It's a little awkward that we're going to use Aether Hub for white mana and get this Thraben Inspector. And then we're going to play Heart of Kiran, which we can't crew. So this could be bad. We'll see. I certainly hope it's not bad. Ooh, that was perfect. That was just what we needed. And now if we could draw a sweet 3-drop, that'd be really nice. Thalia would be great. That would actually be the best in case we're against something like the 4-color Saheeli deck, which I haven't actually been seeing very much. Swing and a miss. So I think what I'm hoping to draw here is a Toolcraft Exemplar. So I'm going to crack my clue using this Aether Hub. Can we do it? Oh, almost. I could have also just not played the Aether Hub, but my colored mana is kind of at a premium, and it didn't seem like holding up Fatal Push was going to be particularly important. Another Anticipate deck. I wonder if we're against the Temur Tower deck. That would be my best guess. Now, any threat from our deck, other than Heart of Kiran, will crew our Heart of Kiran. Alright, there's the tower. We unfortunately don't have a good start. This is certainly the sort of thing we wanted to draw. If we could have drawn a Gideon here, that would have been really good. But getting this Ballista as opposed to nothing is certainly preferred. I think I want to crack my clue. Ooh, Chandra's a nice one. And I'm probably going to lose my heart, but I'm kind of okay with that. If my opponent kills my heart, then my other creatures are free to attack. And I'm not really worried about any planeswalkers. So my opponent can actually shoot down 2 things. Oh no, he's 1 energy short. Now my opponent does get to kill all the things. That's pretty annoying. This is also my only artifact, which is a little unfortunate. My opponent chooses not to kill my Thraben Inspector, which is probably a wise decision. And if my opponent played something like a Rogue Refiner, I think I wouldn't kill it with the Unlicensed Disintegration. There's not a whole lot we can actually cast here. So there's a good chance this Chandra does 2 damage and then dies to the tower. But there's also the chance of a counter spell. Now we're in pretty bad shape. We can just draw a couple Walking Ballistas. We might be okay. Wow, my opponent's going for me instead of the Thraben Inspectors. That surprises me a little bit. Ooh, Heart of Kiran. So I think if my opponent had a Gear Hulk, my opponent would have cast it there to counter the Heart of Kiran. Because now if my opponent casts it, I'm going to Unlicensed Disintegrate it. I'm also unlikely to activate this Heart of Kiran, except as a last resort. Because it not only is keeping my Unlicensed Disintegration turned on, it is also keeping my Spire of Industries turned on now that I have no energy. That's pretty important. And as you may have guessed, land was not a good draw there. Finally, my opponent decides he's just gotta kill the Inspector. And at this point, I don't think I can actually ever realistically crew this heart. I guess if I draw a clue, then I could, you know. Wow. My opponent have the negate. Smart move from my opponent. This Gear Hulk is totally bad news. Having these fatal pushes is like a joke. Now we are definitely in rough shape. Need my opponent to not draw any counter spells, and I need to run up some unlicensed disintegrations and walking ballistas, which we can do. Really hope my opponent doesn't have another Gear Hulk. No. Opponent could actually still find a Gearhulk here. Uh-oh. Okay. I mean, that's still not good for us, but we're not as immediately dead. Our opponent can put us to 1 this turn. So maybe if we can draw a Walking Ballista and our opponent just doesn't have counterspell, we can win. But our plus Gearhulk does put us to 1. One. Oh, maybe there's a shock? Shockaroo! Alright, we're toast. Alright. Fatal pushes out. And Nahiri, Ob Nixilis, none of those actually seem that great. Release the Gremlins seems kind of decent. Because there's Gearhulk and the other thing. So I feel like I can take out the unlicensed integrations, bring in all these planeswalkers, and bring in all these gremlins. And just kind of be set. Ooh, this hand's nice. Need to draw some lands, but we've got the Thraben Inspectors to find them, worst comes to worst. Ooh, there we go. So I could choose to play the Scrapheap Scrounger first. I think if I was on the draw, I would do that. But I think it's pretty unlikely that my opponent has an answer for the Heart on turn 2. Opponent's not going to be able to harness lightning it. And the other thing that I would be worried about is negate. My opponent doesn't have that available right away. So this feels pretty good for us. Would like some land drops. Pretty pleased with sugar on top, obviously. Ooh, the refiner. Oh, there we go. So yeah, I guess we just do this. Our opponent is at 10. That is not a high life total. Oh, wow, we really did it. Oh, I should have done that before. Could have gotten in with the Scrounger too. Yeah, in this game we are so far ahead. We started doing stuff at 1, we had a powerful 2-drop, and our opponent had nothing. And seems like a situation where we can just bash with everything. I mean, sure, our opponent can trade, but kind of fine. You want to block my Thraben Inspector? Go for it. I don't even care. Take 7, go to 3. And then we've got a creature with our Scrounger, which is kind of ideal. And what could our opponent do? Nothing. Opponent's toast. Even if our opponent has Dynavolt Tower. Got this baby. And I feel like, yeah, there we go. All right, let's do it again. So it may be a little controversial that I took out the Unlicensed Disintegrations, but I really don't want that many removal spells. And I think Release the Gremlins is just better interaction. I obviously can't interact with the Rogue Refiners, but who cares? I can just run into them with my creatures, and sometimes just kill them for free with my Planeswalkers, or make it so they're completely irrelevant. All right, so here I could play double 1-drop, and that would be pretty good, but I think because I've got this Aether Hub, I'm going to be a little bit more conservative with my mana situation and just play the Scrounger. If my opponent does play a Dynavolt Tower here, and I can draw a land, I wouldn't mind just killing it. All right, well that was decent. All right, and I think here I just want to play my Thalia because that's the most mana efficient play I have available. This is a great opportunity to land Heart plus Toolcraft Exemplar. Assume my opponent's still gonna have negate mana open. A little disconcerting. But negate's gonna tag something really good in my hand. So I guess having it tag Heart isn't the end of the world. There she blows. Still got a lot of pressure. I really like some better mana though. Mana situation is not good. We could draw a red source for Chandra. I would like that a lot. I mean, this is good enough. My opponent might have something like Shock to easily deal with my Chandra, but this is still really good for me. Get to crash in for a bunch of damage. Ooh, that's not a good sign. I think my opponent's hand is a clunker. Have to imagine this means my opponent's dead. Start with this. I think that'll do it. Okay. I've still got you. Opponent could have Shock to not die, but does not. So we did it. This deck is super sweet. And yeah, anyone who's planning on playing Grand Prix New Jersey or just your like local FNM or whatever, this is a really good deck, and I would highly recommend picking it up. All right, have a good one, you guys. Thanks so much for joining me.